Hallkot Shekhenim, chapter 13:1. When a person gives landed property as a gift, the rights of the neighbor do not apply. When the deed recording a gift states the giver accepts financial responsibility for this gift, the rights of a neighbor do apply. Since the deed mentions financial responsibility, it is obvious that the transfer was a sale. It used the term gift only to nullify the rights of the neighbor. How much should the neighbor pay? The value of the property. 2. In the above situation, if the purchaser admits the ruse, saying, yes, we tried to perpetrate deception, it was a sale, and this is the price I paid for it, he must support his claim taking an oath while holding a sacred article. He must then collect the money he claims. As the law concerning agents, it appears to me that the person must claim only a price that is appropriate for the property or slightly more. If whoever he claims to have paid 200 zuz for a property worth only 100, his word is not accepted. 3. If the deed recording a gift states, I accept financial responsibility for this gift, if it is expropriated from the recipient, it will give him 200 zuz. The neighbor must pay the recipient 200 zuz. Only afterwards may he displace him. This applies even if the property is worth only a month of 4. When a person exchanges a courtyard for another courtyard, the neighbor is not given the right to displace one of the recipients. When a person exchanges a courtyard for an animal or for a movable property, we evaluate the worth of that animal or movable property. The neighbor then gives this amount to the purchaser and displaces it, and the purchaser cannot tell the neighbor, give me an article like the one I used for this purchase. For the purchase for this is a ruse, and it is not reckoned with at all. 5. The following rules apply when a person sells a colleague a small portion of land in the midst of his field and then sells him a larger portion of land next to that field. We evaluate the property. If the small portion that he sold him first is of greater or lesser value than a portion of the land he sold him afterward, the purchaser requires the desired land. The neighbor cannot displace him, for the purchaser himself is a neighbor by virtue of the small amount of land he purchased in the center. If the small portion of land in the center is of the same value as the portion on the side, this is an act of deception, and the neighbor is entitled to displace the purchaser from the second portion of the field that he bought. 6. When a person sells a property within the context of a conditional agreement, whether the condition was stipulated by the seller or the purchaser, the neighbor cannot displace the purchaser until all the conditions are met, and the purchaser acquires the property entirely without the original owner retaining any connection to it. Only them and the purchaser displace him. 7. When the purchaser has built or improved the property he purchased or displaced or impaired it, if the neighbor displaces him, he must pay him the money that is appropriate for him. In all his deeds, he is considered the agent of the neighbor. Similarly, if the purchaser took a loan before the neighbor displaced him and the neighbor displaced him afterwards, his creditor may not expropriate the property from the neighbor. The following principle governs all these laws. Whenever a person purchases property bordering on a colleague's property line, he is considered that person's agent. It is as if he were sent only to better his interest, not to impair them. Thus, if he improves the property, he receives only his expenses. If he impairs the value of the property by digging or destroying or partaking of its produce, we reduce the money he paid to him. When do we take into account the produce of which he partook? When he partook of this produce after the neighbor came and brought money to displace him. This does not apply with regard to produce of which he partook before the time. On the contrary, he is considered to have partaken of his own produce, and none of it is taken into account. 8. When a person purchases a field from two owners, and the neighbor comes and desires to displace him only from the portion of the property that he purchased from one, he is not given the right. He must either displace him from the entire property or leave him with the entire property. When, by contrast, the person sells a property to two people, the neighbor has the right to displace either to displace them both or to displace one and leave the other. Now, when a neighbor comes to displace the purchaser before the neighbor displaces him, the neighbor sells him the field he owns that borders on the property, he forfeits his right. 10. When an agent conducts the sale of a property and he himself is a neighbor, he does not have the right to displace the purchaser since he himself sold the property. There is no greater waiver possible. 11. When a creditor of the seller expropriates a field from the neighbor should collect his due from the purchaser whom he displaced. The purchaser in turn should collect his due from the seller. 12. Whenever a creditor expropriates property as a payment for an outstanding debt, the neighbor has the right to displace him. For a person expropriating property should not have a greater right than one who purchases. If at any later date the original owner desires to pay back the money that he owed him, the ownership of his field will revert to him. He always has this right, as will be explained in the appropriate place. 13. When a minor is a neighbor, and the court sees that it is to his benefit, it displaces the purchaser on his behalf or enables him to share in the division of the property among other neighbors as it sees fit. 14. When a man's wife owns property that borders on the property that is being sold, the husband has the right to displace the purchaser for all his wife's property is in his domain. He has the right to exercise every privilege that would be hers. Even if a woman performed the kinyan, affirming that she waives this right on behalf of the purchaser, acts of no consequence, and her husband may displace him. The following was applied if the wife took the initiative and displaced the purchaser, or a servant carried out business affairs on behalf of his master to displace the purchaser. If the husband or the master acquiesces to the displacement, he confirms their deeds. If he desires, he may not confirm their deeds, and the wife of the servant must return the property. Shכenen, chapter 14:1. The following will apply when a person desires to sell a field and brings his neighbor and the prospective purchaser to court. It tells the neighbor, if you desire to buy the field this price, do so. If not, withdraw. Here is the purchaser. The neighbor has no room to protest. He must either bring money immediately and purchase the field or waive his privilege. If the neighbor says, I'll work to raise money, he is not heeded. If he says, I'll go and bring money, and one would presume that he possesses the resources at hand, we wait until he goes and brings the funds. If one would not presume that he possesses the resources, we do not heed him, for we assume that he is merely seeking delay. Therefore, we tell him either produce the funds immediately or waive your privilege. But knows that the neighbor is not given time to amass funds. The following is applied when both the neighbor and the prospective purchaser produce money, and the coins produced by the purchaser are better or more likely to be accepted than those produced by the neighbor. The neighbor is not given the privilege of property may be sold without being given the right to displace him is being given the right to displace the purchaser. If the prospective purchaser desires to buy the property or build houses, and the neighbor desires to purchase it as a field, the purchase is granted because of the virtue of settling the land. The neighbor is not granted the privilege of displacing him. True, if purchaser comes and consults with the neighbor, asking him, so-and-so, your neighbor desires to sell his field to me. Should that purchase? The neighbor does not forfeit his right, even if he tells him go and purchase, and instead he may displace him. He may displace him after he purchased it, unless he performs a kinyan confirming that he does not desire the property. What is necessary for the neighbor to confirm that he has no claim against the purchaser with the kinyan? When he makes such statement before he purchases the property, if whoever he waives his right after he purchases the property, e.g., the neighbor comes and helps the purchaser rent a piece of property from him, or see that he is building or destroying even the smallest portion of the property and using it as his own, and then does not protest or show his claim, he is considered to have waived his right, and he is not given another opportunity to displace him. 3, when the neighbor was in another country, sick or below the age of majority, and afterwards he recuperated, came of age, and returned from the journey, he does not have the right to displace the purchaser, even if he given such a right. The person will never be able to sell his land or property. 4, the purchaser would fear it will be taken from me at a later date. The Gehenim have ruled in this manner. 4, the following is applied when a person sells properties worth 200 zuz for a mana. If the seller would discount the price for everyone, the neighbor is required to pay the purchaser only 100 zuz before he displaces him. If the seller would not discount the price for anyone, the neighbor must pay the purchaser for the 200 zuz the property is worth. For the zif, the seller gave the purchaser a gift. If a person purchased property worth a mana for 200 zuz, the neighbor cannot displace him unless he gives him 200. If the neighbor protests, they are perpetrating acts of deception together. The purchaser must take an oath while holding a sticker article. Afterwards, he may collect the 200 zuz. If there were witnesses, the purchaser gave 200 zuz, the neighbor claims that there was not agreement between him and the seller, and that he definitely knows that in truth the seller took only 100 zuz from him. The neighbor must pay the amount of the money the witnesses stated. Afterwards, he may displace the purchaser and require him. The picture has that he purchased the property for 200 zuz after taking that oath. The purchaser is under no further obligations. It's interesting about returning something that was on sale. Okay. 5, the following is applied whenever a person wants to sell land or property and two people came offering to purchase it. Each one is willing to pay the same price, and neither of them is a neighbor. If one of the prospective purchasers was an inhabitant of the city and the other dwelled in the outlying fields, then the inhabitant of the city is given priority. If one of them lives close to the property being sold and the other is a Torah scholar, the Torah scholar is given priority. Similarly, if one is a relative and the other one is a Torah scholar, the Torah scholar is given priority. If one is relative, the other one lives close to the property. The one who lives close to the property is given priority. This is also an act of good and justice. In any of the above situations, if the other person acted first and acquired the property, the scholar does not have the right to displace him. If neither of them owns property bordering on the property being sold, and our cities establish these rules only as an expression of piety and a generous spirit. This concludes the laws of neighbors. Hallchos, שלוחין, ושתפין, Chapter 1, laws pertaining to agents and partners. The purpose of these laws is to know the rules pertaining to neighbors, to persons, agents, and his partners, and the injunctions that apply with regard to purchases, sales, losses, and profits. These laws are explained in the chapters that follow. 1. When a person tells Kali, go out and sell landed property for me, movable property, or purchase for me, then the person should perform his agency selling or buying. All of these are binding. It is not necessary for a person who appoints an agent to perform a kinyan or have the appointment observed by witness. Instead, the statement he makes to a colleague is sufficient. Witnesses are necessary solely to reveal what transpired. If one of the two denies the matter, as the case with regard to claims. 2. When an agent intentionally violates the instruction of his principal, these are of no consequence. Similarly, if he erred, even with regard to the slightest amount, the transaction, whether involving landed property or movable property, is nullified. For the principal can claim, I send you to improve my position, not to impair it. The principle is, with regard to movable property, the laws of Binah do not apply unless one pays 6 or more than the property price for an article, and that these laws do not apply at all with regard to the table of servants, promissory notes, and landed property. They do, however, apply when the seller or the purchaser himself conducts the transaction. When, however, it's conducted by an agent and he erred in his evaluation with regard to even the slightest amount, the transaction is nullified. 3. When a person gives money to an agent to purchase land or property, and the agent purchased it for him without requiring the seller to accept the financial responsibility, if he expropriated it from the purchaser, he is considered to have, if it is expropriated from the purchaser, he is considered to have damaged the principal's position. The agent must purchase the property without financial responsibility, as he did for himself. Then he must sell to the principal and accept financial responsibility. The decision is rendered because the agent purchased the property without money, with money belonging to the principal. The agent must accept the financial responsibility himself. Some laws apply in all analogous situations. Therefore, if the principal explicitly stipulated to appoint the agent in that capacity, whether he improves or his position or impairs it, he may not retract, even if the agent will interfere with 100 dinar for a dinar for him, or purchase one worth a dinar for 100, and the principal must pay the agent as he originally stipulated. 4. When a person tells the agent to sell a portion of my field large enough to sow a saw, and he sells a portion large enough to sow 2 saw, the agent is considered to have added to the principal's instruction. The purchaser requires only an area large enough to sow 1 saw. The principal told the agent to sell a portion large enough to sow 2 saw, and the agent sold an area large enough to sow 1. The agent is considered to have violated the principal's instruction. The purchaser does not acquire anything. If the principal told the agent to sell my field to 1 person for me, and the agent sold it to 2 people, the sale is nullified for he violated the principal's instruction. If the principal told the agent to sell the field for me without giving further instructions, the sale will be made by the agent or binding, even if he sold property in 100 portions. 5. When a person gives money to his agent to purchase wheat or other types of merchandise, the agent does not make the purchase. The principal does not have the natural claim against the agent, only complaints. The following is applied if the principal gives an agent money to purchase wheat, whether to eat or to use as merchandise. The agent purchases barley. If the price of the barley that he purchased becomes less than the price of wheat, the agent must be at a loss because he deviated from the instructions he was given. If the price of barley increases more than the price of wheat, the profit belongs to the owner of the money. If the price of merchandise was fixed, an additional quantity, weight, or measure was given the agent, whatever was added by the seller should be divided between the two. I.e., the additional measure should be split between the agent and the principal. If the object sold does not have a fixed price, everything should be given to the principal. 6. The following is applied when a person owes a colleague money, whether because of a debt an entrusted article or a wage, and he gave the money to an agent and told him, bring this money to my creditor. The agent is not required to take special care of the matter and pay the creditor in the presence of witnesses. If the principal told the agent do not pay the debt unless witnesses observe it, and he paid the debt in the absence of witnesses, the agent is liable should the creditor demand payment of the debt again. Similarly, if the debt was recorded in a promissory note, the agent paid the debt outside the presence of witnesses and did not take the promissory note, the agent is liable should the creditor demand payment of the debt again. This applies whether the debtor told the agent take the promissory note and give him the money, or give him the money and take the promissory note for by not taking the note. The agent impaired the principal's position and did not improve it. 7. Following was applied when a person sends money that he possesses with an agent saying, bring this money to so-and-so because I owe it to him. The agent went and gave the creditor the money outside the presence of witnesses of the agent that I paid, and the creditor of the worker said I did not receive it. And the three are standing together with the following course of action should be taken. The agent should take a has that he paid the debt. The creditor of the worker should take an oath that he did not receive anything, and then the principal should pay the creditor or the owner of the entrusted object. Even if there were two agents trusted with making the payment, the testimony is of no consequence because they are involved parties for the required take has one will apply when the agent denies the same to the creditor, and the three are standing together. If wherever the agent comes, the principal tells him, I paid your creditor as you instructed me. The principal is not required to take an oath that he performed his mission, for there was no one who issues a definite claim that he did not perform his mission. Similarly, if the agent died or traveled overseas and the creditor came to demand the payment of the debt, the debtor may not require him to take success with the agent did not pay him, for there is no one who issues a definite claim that he received the money. Instead, the debtor should have a ban of officers from issued against anyone who demands payment a second time. Afterwards, he must pay the debt he owes. Similar principles apply in all analogous situations. 8. The following laws apply when Reuben sent a letter to Shimon telling him, you owe me a money, send it to me with Levi. If Shimon is willing to send the money with him, he is no longer responsible. This applies whether a loan or a trusted object is involved, provided you recognize the letter was written in Reuben's handwriting. If the creditor claims to not write the note or send it to you, then I must take a short has that he received the note, and therefore he sends the money. He is not under any further obligation. This is the manner in which my teachers ruled. Difference apply whether the note was not written in the principal's handwriting. The other did not know that it was written in his handwriting, even if it contained signs and letters that only they knew about. If Reuben claims I did not send you a letter, other people tricked you. Shimon is responsible for the funds. He must pay Reuben the funds. If the funds do not reach him after he issues a ban of officers against anyone who intentionally sent a letter and denies it, those who rule Reuben must take an oath before collecting the money, as is required of others who take oath before collecting their due. 9. Following was applied when Levi becomes as an agent of Reuben and takes 50 zills from Shimon, and then Reuben comes and claims I sent him only to take 20, and all that he brought me was 20. Reuben must take an oath supporting his claim. Is required of anyone who admits a portion of his claim that was made against him. Levi must take his rules has that he give Reuben the 50 zills that were given to him. The above scenario was repeated in an instance where Shimon owed money to Reuben. Shimon paid the difference from his own resources. Similar laws apply in all analogous situations.